Guy Fisher is a name that carries both fascination and fear in the annals of American history, especially in the underworld of organized crime. Born in the turbulent streets of Harlem in 1947, Fisher rose to notorious fame as a key figure in the infamous Council, a consortium of drug lords who controlled the heroin trade in New York City during the 1970s and 1980s. But Fisher's story is much more complex than the stereotypical tale of a drug dealer. He was not only a ruthless businessman, but also a man with a sharp mind, a community hero in his own right, and one of the first black men to own the legendary Apollo Theater in Harlem. This story of Fisher's life is a tale of ambition, resilience, and ultimately tragedy. Early life from Harlem streets to crime's heights. Guy Fisher was born and raised in the Harlem neighborhood of New York City, an area plagued by poverty and limited opportunities. Harlem in the 1950s and 60s was a cultural epicenter, but it was also a neighborhood weighed down by systemic neglect, drug addiction, and crime. Young Guy Fisher grew up surrounded by these harsh realities. His family struggled financially like many others in Harlem, and his environment offered few paths to success that didn't involve crime. By the time he was a teenager, Fisher had already been exposed to the lure of fast money and a dangerous lifestyle. The line between surviving and thriving was razor thin, and Fisher was determined not just to survive but to dominate his surroundings. If you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. The Council and the Heroin Empire. In the 1970s, Fisher's rise was fueled by his association with the Council, an elite group of African American drug lords who controlled a vast network of heroin distribution in New York City. Led by the infamous Nicky Barnes, the Council operated with a blend of corporate precision and brutal enforcement, transforming the heroin trade into a highly profitable business. Fisher joined the Council at a time when it was expanding rapidly, and he quickly proved himself a savvy operator. His street smarts, combined with his charisma and strategic mind, helped him rise through the ranks. Unlike many of his peers, Fisher was known for his intelligence and had his ability to handle business with a cool, level-headed demeanor. This quality made him indispensable to the Council, and soon he was managing some of the organization's largest and most lucrative operations. Under Fisher's guidance, the Council's heroin empire flourished, flooding the streets of Harlem and beyond with a potent drug. The business brought in millions of dollars, money that Fisher and his associates used to buy luxurious cars, expensive clothes, and upscale homes. Fisher became wealthy and influential, but the drug trade's impact on the community was devastating. Families were torn apart, addiction rates soared, and Harlem streets became more dangerous. Despite this, Fisher saw himself not just as a drug dealer but as a man who was taking advantage of the limited opportunities available to him in a society that had marginalized him and people like him. A community leader or a ruthless drug lord. Fisher's story takes a complex turn when you consider his role in the community. Unlike many drug lords who simply took from their communities, Fisher also gave back in ways that made him loved by some Harlem residents. He invested in local businesses, provided jobs, and sponsored community events. His most famous venture was his purchase of the Apollo Theater in 1977. The Apollo was a historic landmark and cultural icon in Harlem, known for launching the careers of legendary artists like James Brown and Aretha Franklin. By buying and restoring the Apollo, Fisher cemented his place in Harlem's history, making him a local hero to many. This dual identity, part ruthless drug lord, part community leader, made Fisher a complicated figure. Some saw him as a Robin Hood-like character, someone who gave back to his community even as he profited from its misery. Others saw him as an opportunist who used his community connections to build his empire without concern for the lives ruined by heroin. Fisher's own view was somewhere in between. He reportedly felt a deep loyalty to Harlem and a genuine desire to uplift his neighborhood. But he also saw the heroin trade as his only realistic path to wealth and power, given the systemic barriers he faced as a black man in America. The downfall, betrayal, arrest, and life imprisonment. Guy Fisher's life took a dramatic turn in 1983 when he was betrayed by his former mentor, Nicky Barnes. Barnes, who had been arrested and faced a lengthy prison sentence, decided to become an informant for the government. He provided information on his former associates, including Fisher, leading to a series of arrests that dismantled the Council. Fisher was arrested on charges of drug trafficking, racketeering, and other crimes. In 1984, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Fisher's downfall was a betrayal of epic proportions. Barnes had once considered Fisher his partner, even a friend, but Barnes' decision to cooperate with the authorities shattered any remaining loyalty he felt towards the council or Fisher. This act of betrayal underscored the precariousness of loyalty and trust in the world of organized crime, where alliances are often built on convenience rather than genuine loyalty. In prison, Fisher's story took another unexpected turn. He became a model inmate, earning multiple degrees including a PhD in sociology. He devoted himself to education and rehabilitation, even mentoring younger prisoners and sharing his story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of the drug trade. Fisher's transformation in prison showcased the intelligence and potential he had possessed all along, a potential that had been channeled into crime because of limited opportunities. His academic achievements and commitment to self-improvement won him respect even among those who condemned his past actions. Legacy: a cautionary tale of ambition and consequences. Guy Fisher's life is a cautionary tale about the devastating effects of systemic poverty, limited opportunity, and the lure of fast money. His rise to power came at a tremendous cost, both to himself and to his community. Fisher's story is also a reminder of the dualities that can exist within a single individual. He was both a drug lord and a community hero, a man who destroyed lives with heroin and who saved lives with his charitable acts. This complex legacy reflects the difficult choices that many people in marginalized communities face, and it raises questions about the line between survival and morality. Fisher's ownership of the Apollo Theater remains one of the most ironic symbols of his life. The Apollo is a place of art, culture, and black excellence, a stark contrast to the destruction caused by the heroin trade. In the end, Fisher's story is not just about a drug lord, it's about the system that creates people like him. It's about a society that, through neglect and discrimination, left him few options beyond crime. Fisher's life is a reminder that every choice has consequences, and every path has a price. Reflections on redemption and regret. Today, Guy Fisher is free, a relic of a bygone era in Harlem's history. His story has faded into obscurity for many, overshadowed by newer tales of crime and redemption. Yet his life remains relevant, offering lessons about ambition, loyalty, and the limits of the American dream. In prison, Fisher became an example, using his time to educate himself and to help others avoid the mistakes he made. His story is not one of simple good or evil, but of a man shaped by his environment, his choices, and the harsh realities of his time. The tale of Guy Fisher reminds us that the lines between hero and villain are often blurred, shaped by context and perspective. For some, he will always be a villain who profited from the suffering of others. For others, he remains a local hero, a man who gave back to his community when few others would. Fisher's story, ultimately, is a story of human complexity, a reminder that every life is a mix of light and shadow, ambition and regret, and that the choices we make echo far beyond ourselves. Guy Fisher's legacy, like Harlem itself, is filled with contradictions. Expanding on the story of Guy Fisher, his complex legacy, and the lingering impact of his life on Harlem, we gain a deeper perspective on the web of circumstances that defined him. His journey speaks to themes of redemption, transformation, and the heavy cost of a life shaped by crime, poverty, and ambition. To explore his influence further, we need to examine the social dynamics that led him down this path, the aftermath of his actions on his community, and the nuances of his transformation in prison. These final reflections help us to understand not only Fisher but also the broader American landscape that created and still creates figures like him. The system that shaped Fisher, a cycle of poverty and crime. The rise of Guy Fisher cannot be fully understood without looking at the environment in which he was raised. Harlem in the mid-20th century was a place of cultural vibrancy but also deep economic struggle. Systemic issues such as racial segregation, lack of economic opportunities, and inadequate education created conditions that made crime appear as one of the few viable paths to financial success. Growing up in a society where opportunities were often shut off because of skin color and class, Fisher, like many others, was left to find his own way. This is not an excuse for his actions, rather, it's an understanding of the forces that shaped him. Fisher didn't wake up one day deciding to be a drug lord. Instead, he was drawn to the lifestyle by the promise of power, respect, and wealth, all things that seemed impossible to attain through legitimate means. In the 1970s, Harlem was hit hard by the heroin epidemic, With drugs spreading through the community and devastating families, Fisher saw an opportunity, and although it came with a moral cost, he pursued it to escape the cycle of poverty. Harlem's struggle with drugs and the impact of Fisher's empire. As Fisher rose in the heroin business, the impact on Harlem became clear. Families were destroyed, and addiction became rampant. It was ironic that someone who prided himself on being a man of the community was also a key player in its destruction. However, Fisher was not alone. The heroin epidemic was part of a larger system of economic and social decay, fueled by limited job opportunities and discriminatory policies. At the time, government policies did little to address the root causes of addiction. Law enforcement often targeted low-level drug users rather than the traffickers and kingpins, which only exacerbated the problem. For many in Harlem, heroin became a means to cope with poverty, loss, and a sense of hopelessness. Fisher's empire capitalized on this pain. While he enjoyed the financial benefits of the drug trade, many in his community bore the costs, paying with their lives and health. The cost of betrayal. Nicky Barnes and the end of the council. Guy Fisher's downfall came swiftly, and it carried a painful lesson about loyalty and the code of the streets. Nicky Barnes, his mentor and close friend, had once been one of the most powerful drug lords in Harlem. Together, Barnes and Fisher built a criminal empire that was as profitable as it was ruthless. But when Barnes found himself facing a lengthy prison sentence, he chose self-preservation over loyalty. His cooperation with law enforcement was a seismic betrayal, shattering the myth of loyalty in the criminal underworld. The story of Barnes and Fisher illustrates the harsh reality of the drug trade. For all the talk of loyalty and codes of honor, self-interest often wins out. Fisher's betrayal by Barnes marked the end of an era. It also forced Fisher to confront the consequences of his life choices in a brutal way. The betrayal hurt not only because it destroyed his empire, but also because it came from someone he had trusted. This betrayal exposed the emptiness at the heart of the criminal lifestyle, a world where alliances are often illusions and friendships are fragile. Transformation behind bars. The rebirth of Guy Fisher. Once in prison, Fisher's life took an unexpected turn. Many would expect a life sentence to mark the end of any personal growth, but for Fisher, it was the beginning of a profound transformation. Faced with the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars, he made a choice to use his time wisely. Fisher dedicated himself to education, earning multiple degrees, including a PhD in sociology. In a world that had once rewarded him for ruthlessness, he now sought meaning in knowledge and self-improvement. This transformation was both inspiring and ironic. The man who had contributed to the suffering of so many now spent his days trying to better himself and help others. Fisher began mentoring young inmates, urging them not to follow in his footsteps. He became an advocate for education, arguing that one of the most powerful tools for change was knowledge. In a way, his journey became a symbol of redemption, not because it erased his past, but because it showed the potential for change even in the most unlikely of circumstances. Redemption and regret, a life of what could have been. For Guy Fisher, redemption has been a complicated concept. On one hand, he used his time in prison to turn his life around, becoming a scholar and mentor. On the other, he knows that no amount of self-improvement can undo the harm he caused. Fisher himself has spoken of the regret he feels for the impact his actions had on Harlem and the people he grew up with. The legacy he left behind in the streets is one of pain and loss, and he has had to live with that reality. In interviews, Fisher has expressed a deep sense of remorse, not only for his criminal activities but also for the missed opportunities to use his talents in a positive way. His story is one of wasted potential of a man who could have been a businessman, a leader, or even an academic under different circumstances. For Fisher, redemption has meant accepting this regret and doing what he can to make a difference, even from behind prison walls. The Apollo Theater, a symbol of dreams and irony. Perhaps one of the most powerful symbols in Fisher's life is the Apollo Theater. As one of the few black men to ever own the historic venue, he realized a dream that seemed almost impossible in his time. The Apollo was, and still is, a cultural beacon, a place where black artists and performers have found a stage and a voice. Fisher's ownership of the Apollo represented not only a business venture but also a claim to Harlem's legacy and culture. It was a paradox that a man so deeply involved in crime could also be the owner of one of Harlem's greatest symbols of hope and creativity. The Apollo Theater stands as a testament to Fisher's complicated legacy. On one hand, it reflects his ambition and his desire to uplift his community. On the other, it is a reminder of the irony of his life, a man who sought to bring pride to Harlem while also contributing to its destruction. The theater's survival, despite Fisher's downfall, is a testament to the resilience of Harlem itself, a neighborhood that has weathered many storms and remains a cultural powerhouse. The continuing impact of Fisher's story. Guy Fisher's story is a piece of history, but its lessons remain relevant. Today, Harlem and many other neighborhoods still grapple with issues of poverty, crime, and systemic inequality. The same conditions that led Fisher into the drug trade persist, and new generations face similar choices. Fisher's life is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of seeking fast wealth through crime, but it's also a story of resilience, showing that transformation is possible even in the darkest circumstances. Fisher's legacy is complex. For some, he will always be remembered as a criminal, a man who profited from the suffering of others. For others, he remains a symbol of Harlem's resilience and a man who tried to redeem himself despite his mistakes. His story raises questions about the nature of redemption and whether society is willing to give people like him a second chance. Fisher's life invites us to consider what it means to truly change and whether our society values rehabilitation or only punishment. A broader reflection on justice and forgiveness. Guy Fisher's life story also brings up important questions about justice and forgiveness. For many people, his sentence to life without parole seemed just, given the scale of his crimes. But his story also forces us to think about the purpose of the justice system. Should it be solely punitive, or should it allow for transformation and redemption? Fisher's journey shows that people can change, even in the most restrictive conditions. Some argue that Fisher's contributions in prison, his mentorship, his education, and his efforts to make a positive impact helped reduce his life sentence. Others believe that his past actions were too severe to overlook, no matter his efforts to reform. This debate highlights the complexities of justice, especially in cases involving systemic factors like poverty and discrimination. Fisher's life poses a challenge to a system that is often unforgiving, asking whether true justice should include a path to redemption. Guy Fisher's story as a lens on society. In many ways, Guy Fisher's life is a reflection of American society itself, particularly the struggles of Black Americans in marginalized communities. His story sheds light on the lack of opportunities, the lure of crime as a means of escape, and the harsh penalties for those who choose that path. Fisher's journey from drug lord to scholar is not just his own, it's a story shared by many who grew up in similar circumstances. His life invites us to consider how society can do better by providing real opportunities, addressing poverty, and offering paths to success that don't involve crime. Fisher's story also reveals the impact of systemic racism and economic inequality, forces that continue to affect countless people today. His life is a reminder that the decisions people make are often shaped by the options available to them. By understanding Fisher's story, we can gain insight into the challenges that face communities across the country, challenges that require systemic change if we are to break the cycle of poverty and crime. A legacy of lessons. Guy Fisher's story is a legacy of lessons. It teaches us about ambition, the cost of crime, the possibility of change, and the importance of second chances. Fisher's life is a tapestry of contradictions, a man who both uplifted and damaged his community, a criminal who found redemption, a leader who lost everything. His journey reflects the dualities within us all and the complexities of life in an imperfect society. Fisher's legacy carries on as a reminder of the power of choices, the impact of our environment, and the possibility of redemption. It is a story that warns us about the dangers of crime but also shows that change is possible. In his transformation, we see a spark of hope, the belief that people can grow beyond their past. And in his regret, we see the price of ambition when it is guided by the wrong values. Fisher's life is a reminder that every choice has consequences, and that even those who make mistakes deserve a chance to write a new chapter. Guy Fisher's life story is a powerful narrative that weaves together ambition, betrayal, transformation, and redemption. From the streets of Harlem to the confines of prison, his journey is one of highs and lows marked by moments of triumph and tragedy. Fisher's life reminds us that even the most flawed individuals are capable of growth and change, and it challenges us to think about the kind of society we want to create, a society that values justice but also recognizes the potential for transformation. His legacy, both tragic and inspiring, remains a complex piece of Harlem's history and a lesson for generations to come. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. Also, don't forget to join our YouTube membership team for more exclusive content.